Hey there, today I'm going to show you how to build this flip-top tool stand. It has this super solid, user-friendly locking system that's easy to make, and I'll show you how. You'll need a full sheet of 3/4 inch plywood for this build. I had mine cut down to manageable pieces in the store, then finished making the cuts in the shop. If you want to build a flip-top stand for yourself, you'll find all the measurements and a cut list on my website. I'll leave a link down below. There are a lot of flip-top carts out there, but I was inspired to build this particular design by Brad at Fix This Build That. Now he's got plans available, so I'll also leave a link to those plans down below. Alright, so after pre-drilling some pocket holes, the first step was to attach the base to the side panels using some pocket screws. To install the top panel, I cut some 5-inch spacers out of scraps so I could prop up the panel while I screwed it in from underneath with some more pocket screws. I installed the back panel and tapped it into place using a mallet. And this piece will actually add stability and prevent side-to-side rocking, just in case you were thinking of skipping this part. At this point I tipped the cabinet on its side and started prepping for the hardware. After making a center line, I used a 5/16 bit to drill a hole on each side of the panel, 1.5 inches in from the edge. I then used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit for the center hole that'll hold the pipe. Next, I extended the sides of the hole to the edges of the plywood and used my jigsaw to cut away a notch. Using your speed square as a guide really helps here. I repeated the same thing on the other side and on the second panel as well. Okay, next I moved on to making the jar. I really wanted a simple utilitarian jar, so I'm just making a simple box. No slides and not even a drawer face. I used my table saw to make a notch on all 4 sides about 1/4 inch deep. I then adjusted my fence slightly and repeated so that the groove would accept a 1/4 inch thick panel. I'm attaching the box from the inside using pocket screws, but I only did 3 sides before sliding in the bottom panel. I then popped in the 4th side into place and added some screws to hold it all together. I made a simple jar pull using a scrap piece of walnut, because who doesn't love walnut? I used my router table to carve a concave notch on the back side, and then simply screwed it into the jar from the back. Okay, now's a good time to attach the casters. I used 3-inch heavy-duty locking caster wheels for this. Time to move on to the tabletop. Off camera, I found the center of the panel and made a line 3/8 of an inch on each side. I then butted a piece of 1x2 up to the lines in order to create a nook for the pipe to sit dead center. With my brad nailer, I tacked the pieces into place, then drilled some countersunk holes and added some screws, making sure to check that the pipe fits snugly as I went. Oh, and don't pay attention to the notch in the front board you see there. That was a mistake and shouldn't be there. I do, however, need to create a notch in the outside pieces, so I made a simple jig that will ride along my table saw's fence. I need to make a 5/16 notch in the center that's 1.5 inches deep. After setting the blade height, I made several passes, moving the fence slightly as I went, until I was able to fit in an eye bolt. I then made the same notch on the other end of the board, and repeated on a second piece as well. I lined up the pieces on the outer edges, and as before, tacked them into place, then screwed them down. I cut up some more pieces to complete the edges, making sure to line them up flush before screwing them down. I need to add blocking underneath the tools I'll be mounting, so I'll have something to screw into. You want to make sure to line up the blocks under the smaller holes if you're using screws. The bigger holes are for using bolts. Next, I repeated the same process for the second tool. Man, this one's heavy. I made sure to line up the smaller screw holes, not the bolt holes, and also made sure that no parts were sticking out past the edge of the platform. Lastly, I sealed the platform with another piece of plywood, securing it with screws all around. Okay, so here's the hardware you'll need for the locking mechanism. You'll need star nubs with 5/16 threads, 5/16 eye bolts 3.5 inches long, and 5/16 washers. You'll also need 3/8 washers, 3/8 bolts that are 1.5 inches long, and some 3/8 nuts. Now, if you didn't catch all of that, not to worry, there are links for all of these in the description down below. To install the hardware, I started by marking 1 inch in from each side. I used a Forstner bit to drill a countersunk hole from the top and the bottom of the platform, about 1/2 inch deep. I then used a 3/8 bit to drill all the way through. You start by inserting the eye bolt, then place a 3/8 washer and a 3/8 bolt into the hole. Another washer goes on the bottom, followed by a 3/8 nut. It's a good idea to use some thread lock so the bolts won't loosen over time. I then repeated the same process on all 4 corners. Okay, so getting the platform onto the pipe is not the easiest if you're doing this by yourself. I won't lie, I had to do a few takes before I was able to line up the pipe with the hole in the platform and thread it through. You'll want to leave about 1/2 inch of pipe sticking out on each side, so I marked the pipe and used a hacksaw to cut the pipe to length. To lock the pipe into place, I used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to make a 1/2 inch recess into a couple blocks, and then mounted them onto each side. After locking the table in position, I mounted my benchtop sander and anchored it to the platform using some 3.5 inch screws. I then flipped the tabletop over and did the same for my planer. To help manage the cords, I used a scrap piece of leather with a pressure snap. Now this will be a quick and easy way to keep the cord secured and out of the way. I'll be honest, the first time I flipped the top, I was a little nervous. I mean, the planer alone weighs about 90 pounds. But I was relieved that everything held firmly and how smooth the flip actually was. Hey, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to this channel, I'd love to have you. Remember to head over to my website for all the details on this build, and until next time, thanks for watching.